Chapter 10. I woke the next morning to the delicious scents of hot coffee, toasted bread, and peanut butter. Rolling over, I found the other half of the bed empty and the sheets cold. I opened my eyes and looked for Devon. I saw him sitting at the small table, drinking from a steaming cup and eating half a bagel with peanut butter spread over it. My stomach growled. "That smells good. Do you have some for me?" "You can have the other half," he offered. "I didn't think your stomach would let you eat yet this morning." I did a double take, thinking about the nausea that had become almost normal. It simply wasn't there. "No, I'm fine, in fact, starving." He held the plate with the other half of his bagel out for me. I accepted it and took a bite. Still lying in bed, I picked up my PCD to check headlines and local news while I ate, and found a message from Alexis with a flight number and arrival time. "Alexis will be here this afternoon. She sent me an arrival time but says not to pick them up. They know it's a long drive and they're getting a car of their own," I said in between bites. "Caden coming with her?" I read the message again. She doesn't say, but I assume so. If possible, he's always with her when she works. Going back to the news, I noticed the time. "Oh wow." "What?" Devon asked. "It's already 9. I can't believe I slept this late." "You obviously needed the rest, and there was no reason to get you up." "True. I do feel pretty good." I scrolled through headlines, not seeing much that caught my interest. You know, my stomach is usually pretty settled by now. It could be that I've slept through the worst of it. Devon gave me a surprised look. "I didn't know that was possible, but that's great. It might come in handy to know you can do that." I nodded and continued eating the bagel he'd shared. We had several hours before Alexis was due, so I called Pierce and scheduled a time that evening to shift Alice. I let Alice know when and where. That meant we were all set. All I had to do now was show up and pull it off. By the time I finished making calls, I was starving. It seemed that the bagel had only made me hungrier, so Devon, Troy, and I went out for brunch. After eating, we went back to the hotel to wait for Alexis, only to find her sitting in the lobby. I was surprised to find that Caden wasn't with her. Instead, Hank was. "Have you checked in?" I asked after greeting the couple. "We're not staying," Hank said. "My family isn't too far from here. I thought as long as we were this close, we might as well go for a visit." "That sounds like a wonderful idea," I agreed. "Come on up to our room then, and I'll fill you in on what's going on." Up in the room, we again borrowed the chairs from Troy's room as we sat and talked. This time Troy was included. "The Aniquitos here is gruff. I can't get a feel for him," I filled them in. "I don't know if it's a front or he's really that unfriendly. Either way, I got his permission for Alexis to visit, but I didn't know you were coming, Hank. He may not be happy." "Who's the local Aniquitos?" "Clayton Pierce." "I've heard of him. He's cranky but not unreasonable," Hank said. "I don't think we'll have too much trouble." "If you say so." I wasn't as certain, but I couldn't help feeling reassured by the knowledge that I wasn't going to have to deal with it alone. We spent the next couple of hours talking. I asked if they had found out anything more about Annie's murder or her killer, but there was nothing new. When the time came, we loaded into our cars and went in search of the meeting place. We got back on the interstate and headed east for a couple of miles before taking the exit for State Route 84. After about 1.5 miles, we made another turn, this time north, away from the small town of Roscoe, heading out into what seemed like endless cotton fields. I don't know how far we drove before we turned onto a dirt road leading into a large yard, but it wasn't long. Looking around, I could see a vacant-looking house, a couple of barns, and several pieces of farming equipment, all surrounded by large trees. Devon pulled the rental car up beside a pickup sitting in front of the house and killed the engine. Hank parked their small SUV beside us and we all climbed out. Looking around, I didn't see anyone, so I checked the time on my PCD. "We're a few minutes early," I said. "I gave us some extra time in case we had a hard time finding the place." "Because you hate to be late." Devon finished for me. Troy stood silent, studying the area. Without opening my shields, at least a little, I couldn't tell what he was thinking. My curiosity wasn't important enough for me to invade his privacy. In extreme situations, I might try to pick up what someone was thinking without their permission. It was rude and invasive. I went back to the front of the car for my water bottle. Standing in the V of the open door, I took a long drink. As I lowered the bottle, I heard the ping of rocks hitting the underside of a car, and knew that meant someone had turned off the paved road into the short driveway that led to where we waited. I closed the bottle and dropped it in the seat before rejoining the group gathered at the rear of our vehicles. A pickup appeared between the buildings and trees. It was a deep blue, full-size Dodge, not more than 2 or 3 years old. As it came closer and parked in line with the 3 vehicles already there, I could tell Pierce and one of the 2 men from his kitchen were inside. We waited until they'd joined us, and I introduced them. "Good afternoon, sir." I spoke to the Aniquitos as he approached. "This is Alexis Jeffries, our harmonia and healer. She'll help me shift Alice tonight." I waited while they shook hands and then turned to Hank. "This is her husband Hank, our Lysandros." I felt the man beside Pierce tense. "You only asked if your harmonia could come." Pierce growled. "I did." I quickly agreed. I didn't know that Hank would be coming with her. "Alexis is our healer, and our harmonia she travels with an enforcer. I expected him instead." Pierce glowered at me and Hank spoke up. "Sir, my accompanying my wife was a last-minute decision. You see, I grew up not too far from here, and I thought we could use the trip as an excuse to visit my family. We plan on heading that way as soon as we're done this evening." His tone was respectful but not submissive. A crease formed on Pierce's brow. "Jeffries, huh?" "Yes, sir." "You wouldn't happen to be one of the Jeffries from the El Dorado area, would you?" The Aniquitos lifted one brow. "I grew up outside of El Dorado," Hank said. "That would make you Brent and Ella's boy?" "Yes, sir." Pierce glanced at the sun. "If you leave now and drive down tonight, you won't get there till nearly midnight. We'll probably stop in San Angelo for the night, but we might as well get as close as we can tonight." The older man nodded and started to speak, but an aging silver minivan pulling into the yard stopped him. We all waited for Alice and Greg to park and join us. With Alice and Greg's arrival, I turned to the Aniquitos. "Is this everyone?" He nodded and I turned to Alice. "I'm glad to see you tonight, Alice. Let me introduce you to those you haven't met." I started with Alexis. "This is Alexis, she's my Pax Harmonia as well as our healer. It's her healing talent that will help me shift you tonight." Next to her is her husband Hank. "You've met my mate, Devon. This is Troy, he's one of our enforcers. I've had some trouble recently and he's here to make sure nothing happens." I turned to the Aniquitos, not sure if he needed to introduce anyone to her. He scowled but spoke. "Alice, Greg," he nodded in way of greeting, "you know Gordon Whitebear." I felt better, finally, having a name for the man I'd seen twice before this. They both nodded and I continued, "This really shouldn't take too long and it's nothing very showy," I warned. "I'm sure you know shifting in your clothes will destroy them, but I understand if you're not comfortable without them. I wore old clothes just in case and I have more for later if I need them." I gave her what I hoped was an encouraging smile. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Alice said. "You don't have to, but you might want to bend as if you were going to shift by yourself." She knelt in front of me, not on one knee like most people tend to do, but on both. She stood on her knees and looked up at me. I tried to keep the encouraging look on my face as I glanced at Alexis and did something I hadn't before. I tried to speak into her mind. I'd done it to others, Devon mostly, but I'd never spoken into Alexis's mind or heard anything from her. You ready? I sent in her direction, not sure if she would hear me. I kept my eyes on her. She met my eyes. Yes, she sent back. I looked back to Alice for a moment before closing my eyes. I found the part deep inside of me that could sense her wolf and sent it into her. I pushed it deep into her body until I found her wolf, firmly entrenched inside her. I coaxed the wary animal, trying to get her to trust me as I lured her closer to the surface. Is it done? I asked Alexis on our mental channel, my eyes still closed. It's done, shift her. I heard the soft tones of Alexis' voice slide through my consciousness. Before Alice's shy inner wolf could sense what I was doing, I used the part of me that called animal forms to seize the wolf and drag it to the surface. The sound of Alice's voice rising in pain made me open my eyes. I could hear cries, but her body was only a blur as she shifted. The cries turned to pained whimpers as the blur faded, revealing a small amber wolf huddled on the ground, cowering from the shock of the painful forced shift. I dropped to one knee and buried one hand in the fur on the back of her neck. I'm sorry, Alice. Your wolf form was shy and reluctant. I had to pull hard and sudden, or she would have fought. That would have hurt you more. She rolled her eyes up, looking at me, the anguish fading from her eyes. She picked up her head and tentatively licked my arm. I continued to rub her neck and scratch behind her ears, trying to soothe the hurt I'd caused. After a couple of minutes, she slowly made her way to her feet. She moved as if she were stiff and sore. I had no idea. The way I had had to shift her may have made it painful for her to move. You should go run and get a feel for your new form. She glanced at Pierce, and at his nod, she turned to her husband, still in human form, and started toward their van, stumbling the first couple of steps before getting the hang of walking on her 4 feet. If you'll excuse me? Greg spoke for the first time, looking at his anakitos for a response. Go ahead. The pack leader replied, watching him leave before turning back to Alexis and me. You did it. I didn't think it could be done. I'm not surprised, until we discovered I could do it. As far as we knew, it couldn't. I said. He was quiet a moment, his eyes following Alice and Greg as they took off, running away from the group, past a line of farm equipment, and into a waist-tall field of cotton. I'm glad you came. His entire demeanor seemed to change. He became friendly, more welcoming. I'm just happy I could help. I didn't know what else to say, so I kept it simple. What now? He wanted to know. Now I hang around and make sure she can shift back after her run. Is that normally a problem? Pierce asked. This is only the 3rd time we've done this. I have no normal yet, but I haven't had to shift anyone a 2nd time yet, if that helps. He looked intrigued. That's good. He looked into the distance for a moment. You know, I can shift her back if she needs it. You don't have to stay if you have something you'd like to do. He turned to Hank. Tell your folks I said hello, will you? He seemed a different person now that I'd proven I wasn't making false promises. I'd like to stay if you don't mind, I said. Just in case Alice or Greg has any questions, but there's no reason for you guys to stay. I turned to Hank and Alexis. If you head out now, maybe you can make it to your family's place before midnight. She's right, Pierce said. We said our goodbyes, and our small group moved out from behind their vehicle so the couple could leave. I was still watching the Jeffries taillights when I heard the quick light crunch of a pair of 4-legged creatures on the gravel, and I knew the treadways were back. I turned in their direction and found Alice, in wolf form, standing a few feet away, watching me as though waiting for instructions. You should be able to shift to human on your own, assuming you know what to do. Her wolf head dipped once, before she disappeared around the other side of their vehicle. She returned a few minutes later in human form, wearing a lightweight t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of sandals. Alice moved with confidence and never slowed as she came toward me. Devon stepped closer as she approached, but Troy stepped away as she threw herself against me and hugged me for several moments. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much this means to me. She pulled away slowly, and I could see the trails where tears had run down her face. I'm happy that I could help you. I knew I was repeating myself, but what else could I say? Alice Pierce caught her attention. Do you have any questions for Miss Daniels? She looked back at me, her face blank for a moment before she spoke. Will I need help shifting each time? You shouldn't. Just like you shifted to human on your own, you should be able to shift at will. A huge grin split her face and she hugged me again. Thanks again. Not knowing what else to do, I hugged her back. Mr. Pierce must have noticed my discomfort. Alice, this time he showed far more patience than I'd seen from him before. Let Miss Daniels go. I'm sure she's tired and you need to check on your family. It was subtle, but I knew he was telling her to go. I didn't know if it was for his sake or mine. Greg thanked me before the couple left, and as they drove away, the local Aniquitos turned and looked at me. It's a wonderful thing what you just gave her and her family. I appreciate it. Was tone sincere. Thank you, sir. I like being able to use my gift to give people something they've always wanted. I couldn't hold back the smile on my face. You're welcome to come back here anytime, and I owe you one. That girl has always been special to me, and you've just given her the world. I don't do this to gather favors, sir. I know. He waved off my argument. You didn't ask for anything in return, but you still did the impossible. I can reward that as I see fit. I knew better than to protest anymore. Then thank you.